He has acre.
Let's go.
Welcome back to the Just Like You and Me podcast, episode 50. This is our 1-year anniversary podcast.
This is crazy. Mike, actually, you sent me a text the other day where you said, Ben, you need to watch the first couple minutes of, I think it was podcast episode 9.
Yes.
You guys should check this out. It's really funny. There's a small clip of me talking where we were just joking about, man, wouldn't it be crazy? We're thinking about this right now. This is almost a year ago. You know, we're going to get to podcast 30. We're going to get to podcast 50. And we actually did say podcast 50, and we're literally here right now. So,
And we would talk about possibly getting guests on the podcast.
yeah, doing virtual, finding out how to get mics and, virtual guests and everything like that. And we've done it all, and we've seen it all.
Yeah, I mean, the first podcast, if you go back and rewatch it, we don't even edit it.
No.
You see me come back from after hitting play, coming over here and sitting down and then just trying to jump into it. Yeah. We've come so far where we can edit, we can make our own shorts, we can produce everything. And then even if you go back to some of the other episodes, I started to cut out all the pauses. So it's just super clippy.
Oh, I remember that.
Dude,
yeah.
I was watching, I was cringing so bad. I'm like, what is this? And then even our thumbnails. I mean, I'm looking right. So on this screen right here that I'm seeing, I'm looking at all of our podcasts. It's on our YouTube. If you haven't, like and subscribe. I mean, come on. You're already watching our anniversary episode.
Come on, guys.
You've probably liked and subscribed, but if you haven't, we would love for you to like and subscribe.
We're probably going to clickbait the crap out of this title too. So, because, this is going to be the story of how we reached 1,000 subscribers in a year.
Yeah, it really is.
That might be the title. How did we reach 1,000 subscribers in a year doing a Christian podcast? And we're going to tell you guys throughout this episode.
Yeah,
so if you guys want to start a podcast and learn how to get 1,000 subscribers, just listen to us and we'll tell you.
Yeah, I mean, I think another big thing with this is just if you have an idea or a goal, you can do it. You can figure it out. And if you have your buddy, you just dive into it. You're not going to know anything. I mean, like I said, look at these thumbnails. It's just a screenshot from a still frame that we took that we kind of look okay. We're kind of smiling. And then it's just changed the episode number. And then we got a little bit YouTube-y. And then we started putting the guests on. And then the first guest, or no, it's the second guest technically, but our first change in the thumbnails with David Beatty, your brother.
Yeah.
And it's like an AI, it's an AI picture. And then there's our logo that's on it. And the reason why we had the logo in there is because when I would put the screenshot into an AI, but I didn't want to pay for the AI, so there's a watermark on it. So I put our logo over the watermark, so it looks kind of good. Yeah, you can see the changes in
You should honestly, you should kind of do a quick montage in the podcast and just show the first thumbnail, and then have it go to the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one, and the next one, and just boom, 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 boom.
I can do that. I'm gonna do it to that boom, 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 boom.
Yeah,
because I can do that now. I figured it out.
Should I have done it slower, boom, 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 boom?
You know what's awesome for that one? I'm gonna just do your faces. It's just all your face. Which is, I mean, we learned so much. And there's one thing actually that we talked about in our first episode, and I think now after getting 1,000 subscribers and after pushing through for a year, we only really missed 2 weeks, but it was life events that happened. And one of them was Good Friday, and we felt a little bit weird posting a podcast on Good Friday. So we're just you know what? We're gonna focus on Jesus for that day, and every day's focused on Jesus. And then also, I just had a kid, and I bought a house, but we earned this. For the OGs, they will know.
I don't know what this is.
Exactly what this is.
Oh my gosh.
We have earned a succulent.
We have a succulent. Holy cow.
We are successful.
Is that real?
No.
Oh. Okay. Once you guys get to 2,000 subscribers, we're going to get a real succulent. Holy cow. Put that out there. Yeah.
Yeah. We got it. We have a succulent. We're successful enough to have a succulent. That was our first banter on the podcast. Getting a succulent. It was one of our first favorite clips that we posted.
I think we were going to make a podcast that was called Successful Succulents.
We talked about it. We didn't.
It was all going to be about being successful. And obviously the true mark of being successful in something is if you have a succulent on your desk. So here you guys go. This is for our subscribers. It's for us, but really it's because of everything that the subscribers have done.
Yeah.
You guys have brought us to 1,000 subscribers, which it still has the tag on the bottom. I could tell you how much this costs, but I'm not going to. You guys can guess in the podcast.
Yeah, I just bought it on the way here and threw it in there. Yeah, I mean, I know Nora's gonna be really excited about that. I mean,
someone is, yeah.
Yeah, the second when I was reflecting, so this podcast is gonna be a lot of reflection, and just I was talking kind of through where we were, what we did, and kind of how we got here.
Yeah.
And I was watching the first episode, and we talked about that, and just all the memories of the early days, and the not knowing how to record, trying to figure out audio, lighting, all of these things that we just had no idea, but we were doing it, and we just had so much fun figuring it out and failing and just trying to get the success. And when you start something that fresh and you know nothing, there's so much success you see and so many little wins you get, and it just brought so much joy because we've done so much.
I think we should also do something too where we should call out some of just the favorite memories that we have as some of the guests, because obviously the biggest thing about this podcast, I think one of the biggest triumphs that we've had is just kind of trying to think like the word, like the change that we made to becoming like a Catholic podcast.
Yeah.
And having Catholic guests on and Christian guests, and just talking about conversion stories and reversion stories, and just, incredible testimonies that our guests have had, because, that was the whole reason, not necessarily why we started it, but really why this podcast is even where it is because of ultimately God.
Yeah, I mean,
ultimately all God.
You can look where we try to put ourselves into it. On our first our first two podcasts, there's no title, but then we talked about brotherhood, and then we just talked about Andrew Tate and the Paul brothers.
Yeah. Then
we talked about just men are weak. We talk about men in society, and then we kept that theme for two. Then we got Calvin on. Mm-hmm. We tried we're gonna figure out how to get a guest, and it failed absolutely miserably. Yeah. You couldn't hear anything. It was so bad. But we really tried to hit those kind of strides, talk about the things that normal male podcasts talk about. Mm-hmm. And then, we just had that conversation. I don't know how it started, but we just realized, we're Catholic. That is everything to us. That is everything that makes our character, what we do, the decisions we make. Why are we hiding from that? Why are we scared from that? Why aren't we having those conversations? Mm-hmm. And it took us a while to figure it out. I mean, going through this, I think possibly Nora, you can argue, was our first time talking about truly Catholic ideals and beliefs, because we talked about her girls group. We talked about just femininity and how that kind of relates to life. That was our 16th episode.
Yeah, that's crazy to think about. Well, I mean, ultimately, guys, it's, if you want more kind of context into about how this podcast really started, I would go back a couple episodes. Mike had a really good explanation of kind of like the origin of the podcast. Actually, I think the podcast itself is labeled Origins of the Podcast. Yeah. But if you guys want more information on just kind of, where that Christian kind of idea came from, it came from Mike's explanation. Ultimately, we wanted to talk about good things. And it's, it's impossible to talk about good things without actually talking about what the origin of goodness is, right? And that origin of goodness is God. It's Catholicism. It's the church. It's the sacraments. It's the testimonies, right? It's the physical testimonies. It's the people. It's the body of the church. It's everything that kind of leads back to God. It's all God, right, in the end. So, I mean, I think, kind of going into it, Mike, what were some of the best testimonies that you kind of remember hearing over the last year?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one that really hit me the most is okay, this is really something. What we're able to portray, getting these people on and allowing them to share their stories was definitely, I'm going to butcher her last name. I'm just not even say her last name. Just Estelle Abramedes.
There you go.
Abramedes,
yeah, you got
Estelle. She's a very prominent female in this area, and she's looked up to. Mm. And she converted the Catholic faith, and it was a really big deal. And being able to share her story and her beautiful testimony of where it came from, and that's really the first podcast people started to come up to us and talk about, wow, that was awesome. That was great podcast. Thank you for having her on. It's whoa. This is having impact bigger than just us. People actually like this. This is almost like a niche. And that was the first one. And ever since then, we're able to share people's stories. And another one comes by Simon Graham. Mm. his testimony, and because I go to I haven't been in a little while because a lot of things going on, but going to Veni Vidi Vici, he's a very prominent member there, and they got to know Simon for a very more intimate level rather than when you meet someone. It takes a long time to kind of break those layers, but in a podcast, in a long form discussion, you're able to just break through all of that and you really get to who that person is and why they make the decisions they are or they're making. And those are the two that stick out for me. What about you? That same question.
Yeah, I think first off, you have to kind of like almost say like a little disclaimer, like I've enjoyed every single guest we've had. I know you have too. Like every single guest we've had, I think has just been absolutely incredible. I think one of my favorite ones, one of the ones that really touched me too, I think it was Estelle's story, because that was, if I'm correct, I think that was the first conversion story that we had on the podcast. You're actually looking at it right now.
Simon was actually the first.
Oh, Simon
That's
was.
why
we had, okay.
Because he came on twice, so I think of him at the second time he came on, not the first
because
time.
He came on once before he was Catholic, and then once after he became Catholic.
Yeah, we only cared when he was Catholic.
Simon's was fantastic. I think that one definitely gave us kind of like a more perspective shift on like what we could actually do with this podcast. Just hearing like someone's conversion story and like hearing a conversion was really cool, because one, it kind of makes you reflect on yourself. And so that's what Simon's really did to me, was sort of like, he's got all these reasons. Like he did his research to kind of look into Catholicism. You know, what kind of research have I done to actually justify the fact that I am Catholic, right? Because I was born Catholic. I was raised with all these different types of ideologies, but what have I actually done to really be able to be, an apologist for my faith? What have I done to really say, like, I'm Catholic for this reason, this reason, this reason, and this reason, because I choose to remain to be Catholic, right? And that's something that I think a lot of Catholics should really think about, especially if you're confirmed, right? If you're confirmed, you are a full member of the church. And how many people who are actually confirmed in the church actually know what it means to be confirmed, right? To actually be a full member. So I think his was really good in that sense, that it really kind of opened up that idea of, what are we actually doing to say that we're Catholic? And then similar to you, yeah, I think Estelle's was also phenomenal, because it made me feel emotional. Like I truly felt emotional just hearing her story and realizing that like it touched me, right? In a way that, just hearing Catholic stories like on other podcasts and stuff like that don't necessarily touch me, because I was actually there in person and just able to kind of like feel the emotions of the room. Like it was just such a beautiful conversion story. And I highly recommend anyone who's watching this right now, you should definitely watch Estelle Abramites's. That was, you said episode, which one was that?
I think we stopped labeling them, but it would be...
Just look up Estelle Abramites's.
Yeah, it would be the 25th podcast.
25th, okay. Somewhere earlier this year, I guess. But yeah, hers was just phenomenal. I thought Zach Taylor's was really good. I thought that was a really cool one, because he's got, if you guys want to hear a crazy story, I think he has probably one of the craziest stories that I've ever heard in my entire life about how he met his wife. It's almost absurd, because of how good it is. So if you guys want to hear a good story, it's crazy.
Yeah,
that one was cool.
Yeah, it's like almost shouldn't have happened, like how he met his wife.
Yeah,
it's a God thing.
Yeah, it's a God thing. Do you think that, because we were just talking about like the origins of the podcast, we were talking about the perspective shift that we had. Do you think, because before we were kind of doing it for ourselves, kind of like as like, this is fun, we just want to have conversations, we want to talk about good things, but then you mentioned how, one of the podcasts, Estelle, like you heard it and then you shared it, and then there were so many people that came up to you and thanked you for saying like, hey, thank you for having Estelle on your podcast. Her story was really important for me, and realizing like the podcast was actually reaching people. Did that give you kind of like a new drive, you think?
100%. I think that my biggest drive from the podcast comes when someone takes the time out of their day to come to our basement, to your basement, to our little studio.
It's our studio.
Our studio. Not a basement. Yeah. Undisclosed location. But when someone takes the time out of their day, and comes down and spends essentially probably like 2 hours, 3 hours with us, depending on how much we're talking and how much we're recording, because set up and tear down, we just have discussions. When they're taking the time out of their day and to share intimately their life, to share their experience, and to be vulnerable with us, when I'm working on the podcast, I feel indebted to them. I feel that it is my duty to do the best I possibly can to present their story as best I can. So, like with Rocco's podcast, that was the first one we tried multicam. in my first time ever at editing in Premiere Pro. I stayed up till 6 a.m. to edit that podcast. I finished editing it. I exported it, went to sleep for 20 minutes, got up, went to church. It was a Saturday night, and then it didn't work. So I had to edit. I had to re-edit it. It took me less time because I figured it out. Finished it, and then the day before it was to be uploaded, I got a call from Rocco and saying, "Hey, I think there's some things I want to switch," which is awesome because I want to present, like I said, I want to present the best of them and what they want to see out there. So I had to stay up till 3 a.m. to edit it and get it out the same day. And that's my biggest drive is I want to share these people's stories because they're giving us their time and their energy. It is, I feel like it's my duty. It's, I have to do it. And it's a beautiful thing. I absolutely love doing it. I mean, these stories, people's lives don't get told enough.
Yeah.
You know, like real life stories. We look at the news; it's all BS and whatever else is going on. But at the end of the day, there's humanity. Human lives are still happening. There's different things going on in people's lives that need to be shared. That's why I was really happy for us to come on the podcast, give a little update on what we're doing, everything going on. And it's really funny. I think it was your podcast. I made the joke about not knowing when my son was coming, and then he came like that, like next week. It's like, funny. Oh, he's here now.
It wasn't even within a week because we had a podcast. We always record on Thursdays. And I think we recorded on a Thursday, and then he was born on the next Tuesday. Yeah. Was it a Tuesday?
It was a Tuesday. Yeah. I thought. Yeah. It was. I think I made the joke say, "Oh, it comes a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, handful of days."
You know, they say God has a sense of humor, so and you know everything is on His timing rather than your own. So He's always going to surprise you, no matter what. Just sometimes in ways that you would obviously never expect. So,
yeah.
Which is just crazy. I think we said it on other podcasts too, and I think it always deserves to be resaid because it's really the core idea of this podcast. The podcast is called Just Like You and Me. And anyone who listens to this podcast has heard this point being made a million times. But, you know, truly at the end of the day, there's so many people that are out there that are just like you and me that have a story that deserves to be heard, right? And it's stories at the end of the day that change the world. It's the stories that, you know, they are the foundational blocks of the world, right? There's the story of the Bible that is obviously like the biggest foundation of like all Western society. Every single ancient society had a story that was told that created that thing. Like the Greeks had their stories, the Persians had their stories, the Chinese had their stories, right? Stories are incredibly important because stories are what bring people together. Something that you hear and you say like, oh, that's where it comes from. Or, oh, like I feel that too. Like there's someone else out there that feels the same way about this topic that I do. Or this person converted for the same reason that I did. And, you know, I'd been falling away, but they seem to be so on fire for their faith. And it's because they've done this with their life. Maybe that's what I need to do, right? Like stories drive things, right? They create things, and they are creations in and of themselves. And it's so important to be able to share creations with every single person because that's what reminds you of God, because God is the ultimate creator of everything. So if you're constantly putting yourself in, you know, creational stories and stuff like that, it brings you back to God in a certain sort of sense, I guess.
It's human. I mean, God came down to this earth in human form for a reason. You know, it's so we can empathize, we can understand. He went through the same things we went through. Mm-hmm. You know, you can't it's hard to compare. You can't compare with someone else who doesn't have the similar experiences to you. And we all have the human experience. Yeah. And that's why this is so important. And there's one thing I do want to say is, yes, this is very much a Catholic podcast. We are very, very Catholic individuals. We label a Christian podcast for really one reason, is because these stories, we want everyone to hear them. We want Catholics, Christians, especially talking about conversion stories. If someone's struggling with something, or there's a little hang up, or they've gone through something in life and they have a thought of the Catholic Church, we want to make sure it gets heard and it shows up on their For You page in some kind of capacity. And another thing that really has been on my heart going through this, seeing comments that are adverse to the Catholic Church, and even we made a video that said Catholics are Christian, and
that drew a lot of fire.
It really did, and I really want to that Catholic identity is Christian. We are Christians at the end of the day. And it doesn't mean that like, oh, we're not going to be like traditional Catholics, all these types of things. But I just wanted to fully explain the reasoning behind that.
Yeah.
Because some people might get like, oh, they're Christian, why aren't they saying Catholic? It's like, we have nothing to do with being ashamed to be Catholic or anything like that. We are unapologetically Catholic. Like one of our guests we had on, who has a podcast called Unapologetically Catholic. Watch it. It's really
Shout
good.
out.
Matt
Great
Poole.
great podcast, by the way, actually.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
First virtual one? It was the first virtual one.
I think it was, yeah.
You can look at the thumbnails.
Yeah,
It's
because
really
our
rough.
audio was not on.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I didn't turn it on. I literally didn't turn it on. But yeah, so we're very, very Catholic. We love our Catholic faith. We just want everyone to hear it from just a unbiased standpoint. If you're able to just, a lot of times if you say Catholic, people will just turn their ears off to it. They'll just completely block it out. All the stereotypes will put up a wall. But when you say Christian, it might sneak in a little bit, and then they might realize, oh wait, that's the Catholic view. Catholic's view on that.
That's actually kind of a surprising theme that we've seen in a lot of podcasts is I feel like a lot of Protestants who will watch like Catholic content nowadays are, pleasantly surprised a lot of times to see like, wait a second, like that Catholic reads their Bible.
Mm-hmm.
Like that Catholic actually does believe that the Bible is a good thing. Like, whoa, that's kind of crazy. Like, yes, Catholics do believe that the Bible is a really good thing. It's the foundation of a lot of our faith in a certain sense, right? Because it's the story of the gospel. It's infinitely important. I think a lot of Protestants have seen our content and have been kind of pleasantly surprised by that aspect by some of the guests. Even some of the guests have put that in like their story of conversion a lot of times is that they had a Catholic friend that they were surprised actually read the Bible. And all of a sudden they're like, wait a second, maybe there is something to this Catholic faith that like they do seem to actually believe in a lot of the things that I do. Maybe we're not as different as, I was led to believe by, some of my pastors or something else or whatever it is, because there's always division that's being brought into the church, right? And so you just need a little bit of, hope on the internet to say like, there is actually potential for unification, right? Like we can all be in the church, right? We are all the body of Christ. So we need to act like it and become Catholic.
Yeah. I mean, I think Zach Taylor put it really, really well. He had a quote from a saint. I forget who it was. But it's like a lot of like presenting the Catholic Church isn't even going into doctrine. It's just saying this is what the Catholic Church isn't. This is what they don't believe. This is what people might say, but this is what actually is said. It's not, and that's over the last 500 years, give or take. There's just been a lot of slander with the church. The church, anybody would agree, was in a weird spot. And there's just a lot going on that was like, okay, the people in the church aren't acting the greatest, right? Back in Martin Luther times. And those same prejudices have translated in every generation. They keep saying, oh, this is what Catholics believe, this is this.
And they've grown.
This. Yeah, they've grown and they've changed. I think I mentioned it. No, I wasn't on the podcast. It was actually a conversation I had with somebody about the Catholic faith. It's like I'm sure everyone has heard of, if not played, the game Telephone, right?
Yeah.
So you have 500 years of history. You have 500 years of people saying, oh, hey, this is the Catholic Church. This is what they believe. And it keeps going on and on and on. It's going to change and be completely different from the actual first thing that was said about the church. And that's something that's really driven me in this podcast and the other extracurricular things that I do is to get back to the roots.
Yeah.
What is actually going on.
And that's why it's so important to, like another one of our guests, Simon, said, do your research, right? Because if you're hearing stuff that is being said today about an entity, or like anything, this is a general rule of life. If you're hearing stuff now, it's, look to the actual beginning of what that thing was to actually decide what it is.
Yeah.
Because especially at the church, I mean, the church is something that, it's governed by the Holy Spirit at the end of the day, right? And the Holy Spirit doesn't allow change, right? So it's not going to change from the beginning of what the Holy Spirit actually instituted. So look to the beginning to see what it is, rather than what people nowadays, 2,000 years later, after it has actually started, are saying what it is. Because the people that are talking right now are not the people that are saying what it was at the beginning. And if the Holy Spirit is truly actually governing it, it will never have changed.
Yeah, and that's what really brought me back to the faith was trying to I'm like, okay, what is going on? What is this thing? Why am I Catholic? Let's look back to the beginning of everything. And then you realize that the views that the Catholic Church had or has were the same views that they had when it started, when it was founded. Nothing changed. Just like times evolve and things might look a little bit different, but at the root of it, it's all the exact same. So many of you might know, I've been doing Divine Revival now for 6-8 months. I don't even remember
Since
this point.
Christmas, right?
Yeah, something around there. It's been a long time. I've been doing it for a little while, and I just released a video just like why Catholics worship Mary, and I literally in 5 seconds I go, they don't, because they don't. But then I had to do research into it. I pulled scripture. I pulled what the Catechism says about the Catholic Church, and I pulled what the early church said about the Catholic Church, or said about Mary in the Catholic beliefs. It's all the same. It never changed, and that's what people need to understand. That's what's also awesome about doing this, is like you kind of mentioned, we're growing in our faith so much.
Yeah,
it's insane.
And I was actually going to ask you, kind of, because that leads kind of perfectly, before we get too far into like Catholic apologetics and stuff. Mm-hmm. We're not a Catholic apologetics channel. We just shared, testimonial stories, but obviously you never shy away from it. But I was going to ask you, how has this podcast changed you, as a Catholic?
It's changed absolutely everything. I was very much a lukewarm Catholic. I loved my faith, but it was just going to church, not really doing anything extracurricular, not reading the Bible, not really diving into anything. But doing this, I wouldn't say I'm an authority figure or I have any type of prestige of any kind, but people look at me. They're paying attention to what I'm saying. So I need to have backing to what I'm saying. I have to, whenever I'm saying something, it needs to not be like doctrine, but it has to be at least close to what I actually believe. It's hard on a podcast. I mean, none of this is scripted. We're just kind of just talking. It's just normal conversation. But what I'm trying to do with Divine Revival is jump into actual deep conversation, doing research, diving into my faith, like having to read the Bible, and highlight the Bible. I couldn't tell you the last time I dove into the Bible and actually highlighted things. Quote the Catechism, read the Catechism. I maybe have opened the Catechism 3 or 4 times my whole life. And in the last 2 weeks, I've opened it and quoted it more than I have the rest of my life. And so it's really, I have to take actual account to it. I have to be accountable to my faith to learn it and jump into it. And it's been fantastic. I've been even changing the music I listen to. I know Exodus 90, I did that and I had to listen to Christian music, but I'm choosing to now listen to it more just because my whole life needs to be a praise to God in everything I do. Every conversation I have, every interaction, movie I watch, all those types of things, I'm doing the absolute best I can to have a reflection of God in that. Where before it was just kind of all right, I'm Catholic at church and then I'll see you in a week, Right. What about you? How's your faith kind of grown or changed or morphed during this last year?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. You kind of said, I'm gonna paraphrase it in a different way, but you're talking about how naturally speaking, when you start to center your life around one thing, that one thing becomes a little bit more important. And so, a lot of our life has obviously been directed right around this podcast. And so this podcast is inherently Catholic. It's inherently Christian, right? So you're talking about all these different stories. So naturally it just kind of feeds into the rest of your life because you're constantly thinking about it. So you're constantly thinking about Christian ideologies and conversion stories and testimonies, which are good. You need to be thinking about those things. You need to be talking about good things. You need to be talking about them. So I think one thing that has really helped me, that has really changed me over the last year, is just living in a sense of Catholic community, right? Who are your friends? Who are the people that you talk to? Who are the people that you follow? Who are the people that you are listening to? And for us, we've been talking to people every single week for the last year that are sharing these incredible testimonies, these incredible conversion stories, these incredible reversion stories, these incredible witnesses to everything about their beautiful faith that they have, where they praise God. And it gives you this really big sense of especially now after becoming a father, and you became a father, how are you going to raise your kid, right? because like we were raised Christian, but you didn't realize how important it was to actually raise someone inside of your own faith. And I think just being around good people and talking to good people about good things has really changed us in the sense that we're only surrounding ourselves with good people and good things now.
Yeah.
There's so many. I don't know if this is the way that it is around the rest of the country and the rest of the world, but it really does feel like in the area that we are, that there are just all of these great friendships that are popping up all of a sudden, where a community is being formed. We didn't even mention it, but I think that is one of the really cool things that this podcast has done, just in this area, has given some people something to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
That they're realizing, because we have a lot of people on, and then we have some people that they know that are on, and then some people that they know who know, someone who else came on. Like, it's just like this whole kind of like big circle. And we're actually going to talk a little bit more about that later in the podcast with some of the future stuff that we're going to be doing. But, it's created this community around the area that we live, where like people are talking about Christian things. They're talking about like, oh, like that was such a good guest. Like, I loved her story. I loved his story about how he talked about this thing, because I've been really thinking about this thing. And it really feeds itself into your life about like, wow, I really have been thinking about this too, because, I've struggled with the same thing that he struggled with. And, maybe the way that I met my wife was similar to the way that he met his wife, right? Just kind of like small things. Like, you just begin to make a little bit more connections. Like, it forces you to use your imagination a little bit almost, because you're just kind of creating different scenarios in your head, and
Mm-hmm.
but also different desires. Like I truly feel a lot more desire to live among good people now than I did before. And it's also because I recognize the importance of it, because I have a son that I need to raise who, and I have a wife that I need to, help guide as well, right? Like we are a family unit. We do things together. And so it's like, how are we going to be in a Catholic community together? How are we going to be in a Christian community together? And so it's just questions like that the podcast has really forced me to think about a little bit more. And yeah, I would say, yeah.
Yeah, you are who you surround yourself with,
Exactly, yeah.
And it's really cool. Like, I mean, if you look at this list of these people we've been able to get on, like a lot of these people, like we know, like it's crazy, the testimonies and the conversations that you can get with these are just a lot of them are friends. Like, we have a really branched down to people that we don't know that well, or reached out to us again on the podcast. We've had a handful here and there. But it's really, really cool. One thing I really love about the podcast, too, that someone also mentioned to me is that's different than other podcasts, is it's a conversation. When you listen to our podcast, I really value that it's like you're like listening to our conversation. We're not performing to you. We're not like saying, okay, this is what you need to believe and this is what we're teaching. You get to listen to a conversation.
It's not a class.
Yeah, it's a break. It's a break from the real life to connect with other people. And I love that so much, and that's something that will never change from this podcast, is that even if we're able to get guests on that are that have a bigger following, stuff like that, it's always going to come back to that conversation between friends.
Mm-hmm.
That openness, the having fun, getting on little tangents and stuff like that. That's really valuable for this podcast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I really do recommend that if you guys want to hear just a good story of conversion, really, like, we really do have some phenomenal stories. And I really hope that people will go to other videos in our channel and just click around and try to find one that really speaks to you, because at the end of the day, you need to hear other people's stories, right? Mm-hmm. Because like, we learn from one another more than we learn from ourselves. Like, I'm sorry, like you can think about things, you're going to learn a lot, but trust me when I tell you that you will learn infinitely more about yourself by listening to other people. That's one thing. That's another thing I feel like I've really learned over the last year is like, you can teach yourself a lot of different things, that intuitive sense that we all have, especially the intuitive sense of our faith. But there is a sense where like we take things in as well. And I think that is the bigger part, because we're designed as human beings to have relationships. Like, we have a covenant with God. Like, the whole relationship that we have with God is to take in what he gives us. And it's the same thing with community. You are designed to be part of a community of faith, being part of the body of Christ, to be able to take in what other people give to you as their testimony of faith to bring you closer to God, because we're all vessels at the end of the day. So it's just all really, really beautiful things. And I think with that kind of being said, I think it's going to be really cool to talk about a little bit more about where this podcast is going to be going in the future.
Yeah, 100%. For those who might be curious, this podcast is going to be continuing. We're not stopping the podcast. We're just going to take a little bit more time producing the podcast, getting guests on, just kind of being more intentional with everything. We had a goal this year to get through a year and get 1,000 subscribers, which we're able to do way sooner than we thought we were able to get that 1,000 subs. But now going forward, we're going to do 2 podcasts a month. So every other week we'll have a podcast come out. We'll still be posting shorts and all of these other things. We'll probably do more short videos from the podcast that kind of get out there, because we found that those really are impactful. Some of our most viewed videos are shorts from the podcast. I mean, sometimes it's a hard ask that for someone to watch an hour and a half, hour, 15 minutes of something, but 2 to 5 minutes, it's a lot easier to consume. And just talking a little bit about me specifically, with Divine Revival, we've been very fortunate we got invited to go to Seek. So Ken Princessa and I are going to be going to Seek 2025 in Utah to produce content. So we're going to be producing content, we're going to be networking, and leading up to that, we're going to be posting as much as we can, kind of finding our voice, finding where we need to be in the realm of Catholic creators. We want to do our own thing. We don't want to try to mirror someone else too much. We also want to get too influencer-y, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, sometimes it gets a little cringy, so we're trying to figure out that. But through that, we're going to be able to grow everything we're doing. The podcast, Divine Revival, and we've been very fortunate working with St. Sebastian's. We made a couple videos for Divine Revival at St. Sebastian's when the Fatima statue came in. That was seen by their marketing department, and they actually wanted to partner with us a little bit more. So we've been working a lot more closely with St. Sebastian's, which is the parish that I'm a part of, that I know that you want to be a part of when you're able to move back up to Akron. You know, it is the parish, you know. Shout out Father Belichick. But doing that it's so rewarding, kind of seeing doors open now and weird opportunities that I never thought were possible, like going to Seek. I've had another bigger Catholic organization reach out for a possible collaboration. It's like, whoa, like we don't have any followers. Like we're still new at this. It feels like I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But doing that, just saying yes to God, and just go along for the ride. Just let it all happen.
I think we should point out too that, you know, if you guys want to support this journey a little bit more and just kind of learn more about the ministry that is being started here, understand that, you know, everything that is being done is not being done it's not us, right? Like none of this is about us. It's always going to be about the guests. It's always going to be the subject of the video, right? It's always going to be centered around Christ at the end of the day. That's always the goal. Especially with Divine Revival. I know you guys are doing like fantastically beautiful things. I was going to quickly shout out, though, one thing that you can do for us specifically is buy the merch.
Yes.
We do have merch.
Please.
And I think that it's really fantastically looking good merch. And if you guys want to check it out, there is a link below. You guys should 100% check out the merch. And 100% you should totally buy it, because if you buy it, you know that you're doing it for a good cause, because, like I said, it's not about us. It's about the guests. So buy the merch for us so that we can have more guests to show to you, so that we can prove to you that it's not about us, it's about the guests.
And another thing I want to add, too, is
there's also stuff for Divine Revival down there.
There is, yeah.
We'll also throw the link. If you guys want to learn more about Divine Revival, we're also going to throw the channel link for Divine Revival.
Sweet.
So I'll
drop it in there. Another thing, too, is as we're going through, we're getting guests on. If there's someone that you think that we should get on the podcast, let us know. Send us a message, send an email, whatever, text us. I mean, a lot of you probably have our numbers. Let us know. We'll love to reach out to everybody. We have a couple people in the Diocese of Cleveland that we're excited to get on the podcast. Some really interesting stuff. There's a deacon who used to work with male prostitutes in Chicago. We want to get on. There is a couple that was on Chosen. They're on 3 seasons of Chosen as extras. But still, they got to hang out with the cast, and they know how all that goes. We want to get them on.
Yep. We have a great guest who's coming next week. So, I mean, if you guys should 100% stay with the podcast, watch the episode next week. He's going to be a phenomenal guest. I'm really excited to have him on. There will be obviously. I'm not going to give it away or who the guest is, but you should totally watch it next week.
Yeah, clickbait it. Make it wait.
Gonna make it a little bit of suspense and stuff like that.
Is there anything that you're like really shocked at that we were able to do this year? It could be either like in directly relation to the podcast or just kind of in general that you're just like, wow, this happened.
I think one of the things that I was kind of surprised by, the biggest thing obviously is the fact that we're at 1,000 subscribers. So at the beginning of the year, we had a meeting with Mike, myself, and Brian, and we were just talking about goals. And Brian remembers this. We were just talking about how by the end of December this year, we wanted to get to 1,000 subscribers. That was the goal for YouTube. And we, thanks to you guys, and our fantastic guests that we've had on, we were able to get to 1,000 subscribers 7 months before we even wanted to. So that was just or 6 months, I guess, technically. So that was just something that really, truly we counted ourselves blessed by. I think another thing, too, was just the fact that we were able to get all the guests that we did.
Yeah.
I mean, like, we have 50 podcast guys, and we were able to get on more than 40 guests.
Yeah.
Well, not more than 40, I guess.
Probably close to it. Either way, I'm going to say more than 40.
More than 30, which is just something that's absolutely absurd. I mean, we did say at the beginning we were going to tell you guys how to get to 1,000 subscribers, and really it's as simple as, posting videos every single week.
Show up.
Yeah, just showing up to YouTube to put your stuff up on there. And also like Instagram too. Like Instagram page has started to grow a lot as well. The Spotify page has always been kind of consistent. Same with like
We're
Apple.
at 84.
84 now?
84.
Which is just absurd. I don't remember what our goal was for that, but I think that we've already...
Probably 100.
I think it was 100. Yeah.
I couldn't pull it up. I didn't have it on here.
Yeah. But I mean, like, it's just really cool to see that the podcast is taking off, that the guests that we're having on are actually speaking to the people that are watching. Yeah. So I think that that's something that I guess I shouldn't necessarily say it's surprising, but it's something that is endearing.
Yeah.
It's something that's really endearing just to say like it's working.
Yeah, to show the hard work that we're putting in, the time, the effort. I mean, it's not a light ask. It's a big thing we're doing. That it's having some kind of impact. You said it's moving, it's growing. One thing that I was really shocked at, besides what you were able to mention, which I'm obviously very shocked on, is like we have a video on Instagram that has over 70,000
Oh,
views.
yeah.
Like, absolutely insane. Like, 70,000 views is nuts for us to have. Like, I'm so grateful for that. It's absolutely insane.
Shout out to Ivan Ortiz.
Yeah, thank you, Ivan Ortiz. And we have plenty of videos, too, on that, like, shorts have over, like, 10K. Like, it's insane. Like, and I think I sent you a screenshot maybe a couple weeks ago of showing what a room looks like with 1,000 people in it. And that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like a lot anymore because we average about like 1,500 views a day. And it's a lot of people that are able to watch our thing. And at each podcast, we're getting over 100 people to watch it across all platforms. It's probably closer to like 130 that watch every single episode, which is
absurd.
Crazy.
I think something too, like that video that you talked about on Instagram that got over 70,000 views, most Major League Baseball stadiums only fit about 30 to 35,000 people. So there's a video on our Instagram page that has been viewed by 2 baseball stadiums, which is like nuts to think about.
It does not make sense to me here because it just looks like numbers.
Yeah,
but that's a lot of people.
Yeah,
it's all.
And we said, it's
all
the guests.
It's the guests. I mean, yeah, it wasn't a clip of us.
No,
All right, clips of us do okay. But yeah, it's like you said, it's all about the guests. It's all about their story. And we just kind of add our little 2 cents in here and there, kind of and empathize and allow the conversation to kind of flow. And you mentioned you did a really, really awesome job about talking about like our different personalities and how it affects the podcast. Where I kind of like help lead the conversation to questions, and you just hammer in like, so this is kind of what you meant. Does it also apply to this? And also me being like, I was just played baseball. Then worked with my hands, and then you were classically trained. You have a degree from University of Nevada.
I do not, by the way.
And also...
No, it's got to be mystery.
A mystery? Okay, mystery.
Unless someone like specifically asks us outside of the podcast. It was funny, there was actually a comment the other day that it was like during the live feed when a podcast was showing.
Yeah.
And some people were actually talking in the live feed, the thing, and because I was watching the podcast as it was premiering. and there's always a live feed where people can live comment as it's going. And some person was commenting like, "Are these guys from Ohio?" And then there was another commenter that was like, "I think they're from Nevada." And the guy was like, "No, it says in their bio that they're from Nevada, from Ohio." And then the other person was like, "But they have a UNLV thing behind them." And there is a reason behind that, but we'll tell you if you ask us in person.
Yeah.
Or in private.
Or maybe we could do our 100th episode.
Yeah,
Give 'em a little
the
bit more.
100th episode, we will disclose the reason why we have a UNLV banner.
Yeah, then we won't have any secrets.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, we won't have any
Good
secrets.
for that. Yeah, guys, get us to 100 episodes. That'll be another year.
Yeah, because the help would be get guests. Because over time, because doing a little bit less podcast a month might take a little bit longer, but we'll get there.
Yes,
You know,
please, if you're watching this and you've seen it up to this point, you should comment down below who the person that you think would most fit on this podcast.
Yeah.
I think that would be a good comment.
Yeah, because you'd be surprised who people know.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Like we had a weird epiphany today. We made a connection. We're like, okay, one of the guests that we have on, they have another podcast, and that person that they do a podcast with, their sibling is a very prominent person in social media, over 347,000 followers. We're gonna see what we can do. I'm not gonna say who the person is. I don't want to not jinx anything, but I won't give it away. You know.
Yeah, we'll see.
We'll see what we're able to. We'll see what we're able to do. God's will be done. I mean, the people we were able to get on, the doors that have opened from this, it's not us. We could not have manufactured this if we tried.
No.
How many other businesses did we try to do?
I mean, like 2, but like
We did. Yeah, there's a handful.
yeah.
I
mean,
obviously nothing stuck.
guys, really, I think that we started this because we wanted more good stuff to be on the internet. And we always recommend, maybe not recommend, but, the internet needs more good things to be on it. And like Mike said, doing stuff like this, it's just putting in the work to do it. It's just showing up, putting on a YouTube video like once a week, 2 shorts a week, 2 middle, length videos a week or something like that. And then do it for 3 months just to see how it works. I think you'd be surprised. I think it's really surprising just to see that, the algorithm in YouTube actually does work the way that it's intended for smaller channels. Obviously the bigger you get, you could get shadow banned depending on what you're saying, but we're not there yet. We haven't been shadow banned by YouTube yet, but
That'd be an honor, honestly.
it would be an honor. We haven't gotten big enough, so if you guys can get us big enough to the point that we get shadow banned on YouTube, I think that would be sick.
Yeah. Also, something I want to add: if you watched it this far and something that you value our podcast, you value what we're saying, you enjoy it. If you were able to share the podcast, just the main channel, or an episode that really stood out to you with 5, 10, one friend,
even one,
anybody, that means the most to us when it gets shared. It's genuinely, it warms my heart.
Yeah,
'cause it shows me that means what we did had an impact.
I genuinely think that we've had some of the best conversion stories that you can hear, and I think that they deserve to be heard by many people. So yeah, if there, like Mike said, if there is a conversion story or a testimonial story or a reversion story or just a clip, right?
Yeah,
like just
anything.
a clip or something like that you thought was worth being heard, make it heard.
Yeah.
We're doing our best to make these phenomenal stories and these phenomenal voices being heard on the internet. So, yeah.
Yeah. I also want to shout out Simon Graham really quick. I don't know if we talked about it on the podcast, but our logo.
Yes.
He made our logo.
Yeah.
If you look at it closely, it's obviously a microphone podcast, but it's a Crusaders helmet.
Yeah, we'll put it on the screen too. Ready?
Yeah. Go, boop. Pop. But yeah, it's a Crusaders helmet to make it look like a monstrance a little bit. So it's a very, very Catholic thing. He did an amazing job on this.
It also looks like a Crusader helmet.
It does look, yes. It's fantastic. So thank you, Simon. Shout out. I appreciate this. I mean, now it's better than what we had before, which is old pictures of us. Actually, we talk about merch. There's 2 things that are really funny that we were able to put on there. First one is the coffee. We actually have the 2 photos that we used for our OG logo on the side of the coffee. It's hilarious. And then we have a shirt that has the picture of the first thumbnail. It is the image of us there. I want to see someone wearing it so bad Just be like, oh my gosh, that's us. It
Yeah.
would just be insane. I made it as cheap as possible. Okay, if you want to buy it, please do. But I think this has been awesome, a great reflection. I don't want to ramble on too much for the audience.
Yeah.
But like we said, we are going to continue the podcast, continue to get as many guests on as we possibly can that have conversion stories that just want to be heard. And if you have anybody, please let us know. Podcast every other week. We'll announce it on our Instagram. We'll keep you guys as informed as possible. But Ben, is there anything you would like to add before we officially wrap this up?
No, guys, click the links below. Check out Divine Revival. Check out the merch. Check out the hoodies. Check out the coffee. And then drink it after you've checked out from the store online. Do you see how I used like a double entendre there for checkout? Like you check out the coffee, but I'm just kidding.
The app sesh.
Yeah. No, really, there's not too much. I think that we just wanted to give you guys a 1-year special just to kind of reflect on the journey that we've had for the last year. And I really want to look back on this in a few years and just absolutely cringe. just thinking like, holy cow, we have come so far. And because that's what Mike and I did with the first video, which you guys, it's still up on the YouTube. It's always going to be up on the YouTube. You should look at that first video and then compare it to this one. It just, I don't know. We cringed, so if we cringe, we think that
you don't need to watch the whole thing either. Just watch the first 2 minutes. You're like, oh,
yeah,
they've come a long way.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think without further ado, I think that's it.
Yeah, as before, I don't know if we fully said it, but just thank you so much. We said it a couple times, but just genuinely from the bottom of our hearts, thank you so much for supporting us over this last year. 50 episodes. We do this for you. We do it for God. We do it for our guests. And that is how we're going to be ending our 1-year anniversary, 50th episode. Ben, it's been great.
Yeah. Also, shout out Rocco Galizia in case you watch this.
Yeah. Shout out Rocco. Great seeing you. See you next time.
Boom.
Boom.